Have you ever felt just overwhelmed, caught between this flood of information coming at you and this deep need to actually understand what's going on?
Oh, yeah. That kind of anxious feeling like there's so much noise, but not much clarity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, today we're doing more than just looking back in time. We're diving into a thinker whose ideas feel, well, incredibly relevant right now.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into John Dewey, specifically his big work, Reconstruction in Philosophy. And what makes this really powerful is our source material includes his 1948 introduction.
Wow, 1948.
Yeah, think about that timing. After the shock of World War I, and then grappling with what Dewey himself called an almost incredibly greater shock from World War II. It's a really potent lens for looking at his time, and maybe ours too.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What's our mission here? We want to trace Dewey's main argument, right?
Exactly. He argued that philosophy's problems, the really deep ones, they don't just come out of nowhere. They stem directly from the stresses and strains in the community life.
Real-world stuff.
Totally. He saw older philosophies trying to find safety in these fixed, immutable, unchanging truths. Outside of time, basically.
Like eternal principles.
Right. But at the same time, natural science was making these huge leaps by doing the opposite, by embracing process, change, dynamism instead of fixity.
And that disconnect
Yeah,
that caused problems.
big problems. This gap between thinking about fixed truths and living in a changing world, it shaped everything. We'll explore how that played out and what Dewey thought we needed for a real intellectual and moral reconstruction.
So why should you care about this? Well, Dewey's ideas, they're not just history lessons. They speak right to that anxious and pessimistic uncertainty that, let's be honest, can still hang over us today.
Yeah, they offer a powerful way to think about navigating our own complex times, you know? How do we balance this hunger for knowledge with the need for practical, meaningful action?
Let's dive in.
Okay, so Dewey, writing in 48, he looks around and sees this massive shift from this earlier optimism about progress, about peace, to what he called a prevailing mood of anxious and pessimistic uncertainty. It was like a shadow over everything.
You can almost feel that reading it.
You really can. And he saw philosophy itself mirroring this disorientation. It seemed to lack confidence. It was retreating into like technical debates or just scholarship about the past.
Not dealing with the big stuff.
Right. Failing to engage with the serious issues of the day. It was almost like an intellectual paralysis, he thought, a symptom of a deeper problem in society.
And I have to ask, does that feeling resonate with you listening? That sense of, I don't know, paralysis or the gap between academic talk and real-world problem. I mean, I certainly feel that sometimes.
Dewey was definitely onto something. His main critique of older philosophies, even the really famous ones, was that they ended up becoming kind of irrelevant.
Irrelevant how?
Their basic postulate, their starting point, was always this search for the fixed, immutable, the eternal, things outside of time. They took common ideas about space and time and made them these universal containers for everything.
Now, he got some pushback for that, didn't he?
Yeah.
People said he had a sour attitude towards the past.
He did, but he was clear. It wasn't about disrespecting old ideas in their context. It was about showing how they just didn't fit anymore. The world had been totally transformed by the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the political revolutions.
Right.
He was basically saying, these old maps don't work for this new territory.
Okay, so what was different about the new territory?
Yes.
Science.
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting. Natural science, just by doing its work, was forced to ditch the idea of fixity. It had to recognize process, constant change, as fundamental as universal.
And Dewey thought that was huge.
He called it the most revolutionary discovery yet made, a total shift in how we understand reality.
But there's a but coming, isn't there?
There is, because according to Dewey, this huge scientific shift, in philosophy and just in general public thinking, it was still treated mostly as a technical matter.
Like something scientists do in labs, but not relevant to everyday life.
Sort of. People saw the results of science, the technology, but they didn't grasp the fundamental change in method and outlook, the embrace of change itself.
And that created a divide.
A massive one. Because traditional morals, they demanded immutable extratemporal principles, unchanging rules from beyond time.
Right. Fixed rights and wrongs.
Exactly. And those were now at complete odds with science, which saw everything in terms of process and change. So you got this deep and impassable gulf between science and morals.
You still hear echoes of that, blaming science for problems like, say, nuclear weapons.
Right. But Dewey argued that was terribly one-sided. He pointed out that the destructive uses often came from pre-existent institutional conditions like war itself, which has been around for unknown millennia, way before modern science.
So science provides the power, but older human habits decide how it's used.
That was his point. Morals, developed in a pre-scientific age, ended up becoming anti-scientific in this new world. They resisted inquiry, resisted testing, resisted change, the very things science relied on.
Like trying to drive a car by looking only in the rearview mirror.
That's a great analogy. So the diagnosis is clear. What's the cure?
Reconstruction.
Exactly. The need for reconstruction was about developing new intellectual instrumentalities.
New tools for thinking.
Yes, tools for inquiry into human and moral subjects that used a scientific method. Observation, theory as hypothesis, and experiment.
Applying science's approach to ourselves, basically.
Precisely. The goal was to overcome the drift, instability, and uncertainty by creating ways of thinking that were actually adequate for this new science-shaped world, bringing our thinking up to speed with our reality.
It wasn't just scientists driving this, though, was it? Philosophers had a role earlier on.
Absolutely. Dewey acknowledged that philosophers back in the 17th to 19th centuries played an indispensable role. They weren't doing the experiments, necessarily.
But they were clearing the way.
Exactly. Clearing the ground of cosmological and ontological debris, as he put it, preparing the cultural climate for science to really take root.
And that climate allowed for big ideas, like Bacon's knowledge is power.
Huge idea. Bacon dreamed of this continuous empire over natural forces. It was a move away from just pure reason spinning webs from itself or just passively gathering fats like an ant.
Towards what?
Towards active experimentation, like a bee gathering nectar and transforming it. Bacon had this radical vision of organized cooperative research.
Let's look together.
Yeah, to gain power over nature, the empire of man over nature, instead of just the old empire of man over man, using knowledge collectively to shape the world, not just dominate each other.
Powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then things got complicated. There was this sort of truce.
Right, a historical compromise, you could say. Science was allowed to operate in the lower material world, the physical stuff. But the higher spiritual realm, morals, values that was left untouched, seen as virtually immutable. And this separation, Dewey argued, created all the dualisms, the splits that tangled up modern philosophy. Mind versus body, spirit versus matter.
But that separation couldn't hold, could it?
No way! This settlement by division, it completely broke down in practice. Why? Because the uses of the new science were just too beneficial in everyday life.
Practical results.
Exactly, which led to secularization, the material, the practical, encroaching on the spiritual, the fixed.
Which some people probably saw as a bad thing.
Oh, definitely, sacrilegious even. But Dewey saw it as a huge opportunity, a chance to actually universalize the method and spirit of scientific inquiry and apply it to morals, to give that secular practical sphere the shape, the content, and the authority that morals were supposed to have.
And it wasn't just science pushing change, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned other revolutions.
Absolutely. The Industrial Revolution, think travel, exploration, new ways of making things, banking, finance, all that spurred invention and experimentation. The discovery of the new world literally opened people's minds.
Absolutely.
Huge shifts. The fall of feudal institutions, the rise of nation-states, and this revolutionary contract theory, the idea that the state exists for the people, shaped by the people's will.
That gave individuals more power, more standing.
Definitely. A new sense of individuals having rights and claims on their own account. And religiously, too, Protestantism breaking from Roman domination led to more liberation of individual conscience and worship.
So all these forces together.
They created what Dewey saw as 4 key pillars of modern thought. First, interest shifted from the eternal and universal to what is changing and specific, concrete. Focus on the here and now.
Makes sense. Second,
a decline in unquestioned authority and a rise in belief in individual minds guided by observation, experiment, and reflection. Ideas had to prove themselves.
show their birth certificate, as you said earlier.
Exactly. They needed to demonstrate their origin in experience and positive consequences. Third, this new idea of progress.
The golden age is ahead, not behind.
Right. A radical idea back then. That humans can actually shape their destiny for the better. And fourth,
The method.
the experimental method. That's how progress happens. Knowledge is power, and you get knowledge by sending the mind to school, to nature, as Bacon put it, really learning from the world through interaction.
But even with all these massive changes, Dewey felt something was missing.
Yeah, that's the crucial point. He argued that these new methods and results had mostly influenced the means of life, the tools, the technology, rather than the ends.
Our goals, our values.
Exactly. Our aims were being affected accidentally, not in an intelligently directed way. The change was mainly technical rather than human and moral. We had the power, but maybe not the wisdom to direct it properly.
That really makes you think about today, doesn't it? Okay, so this shift in thinking, it literally changed how we saw the universe.
Completely. Think about the ancient view. A closed world. Fixed, limited, Earth at the center, unmoving. Everything had its place in a hierarchy, castes in nature.
And change was bad.
Often seen as decay, a fall from grace, just flux, aimless and meaningless, a disruption of the perfect order
Compared to?
compared to the modern scientific picture. Infinite space, infinite time, infinitely complex structure, an open world. Here, change, rather than fixity, is the measure of reality, of energy.
Yeah.
Laws describe the constant order of change.
Oh, from closed to open.
And ditching the Earth-centered view, embracing infinity, that was psychologically huge. What the Greeks often shied away from infinity as chaotic modern thinkers embraced with this intoxicated sense of adventure.
Seeing possibilities instead of limits.
Exactly. Inexhaustible possibilities of progress.
And this view also got rid of final causes, right? The idea that nature has fixed goals.
Yes. Scientific reformers saw that idea of fixed ends as a major roadblock, the cause of the failure of science even. If you assume everything has a fixed purpose, why bother investigating or inventing?
It limits curiosity.
Totally. But when you take those fixed ends off from nature, suddenly observation, imagination, experimentation get enormously stimulated. Nature becomes relatively malleable and plastic.
Something we can work with.
Right. Dewey said this mechanization of nature, seeing it operate by consistent laws rather than purposes, is actually the condition of a practical and progressive idealism in action. It allows us to become homo faber, the maker, the tool user. We become active participants.
And this changes how we think about experience itself. It's not just passive anymore.
Radically different. For Plato and Aristotle, experience was often seen negatively, like being stuck in habit, enslavement to the past. It was considered defective. Real knowledge, certainty, universality that was in a realm above experience.
World of perfect forms.
Exactly. But Dewey, drawing on newer biology and psychology, argued this view was just wrong. Life isn't passive reception, it's activity. Organisms act upon the environment and modify it.
We do things.
We do things. Experience is primarily doing and then undergoing the consequences. His example of the infant touching fire, they do something, they undergo the burn. That's learning.
So our senses aren't just windows.
Not just gateways of knowing. They were invitations and inducements to act, shocks of change, signals to redirections of action. They prompt us, engage us.
And experience learns from itself.
That's the fascinating part. Old experience is used to suggest aims and methods for developing a new and improved experience. It's self-regulating, self-correcting.
So reason and science aren't separate from experience.
No, they arise from it. They're suggested and tested in experience and then used to expand and enrich experience. Intelligence, for Dewey, is essentially using empirical suggestion, ideas from experience, in constructive fashion for new ends.
Thinking becomes a tool developed within experience.
Precisely. And reason itself is experimental intelligence conceived after the pattern of science. Our plans, our principles, they aren't fixed dogmas. They're hypotheses to be worked out in practice.
Goals again.
Tools. Always tools. This is so different from, say, Kant, who thought concepts were fixed, a priori, existing before experience. Dewey saw them as emerging from experience.
Okay, so if reason and experience are active, what happens to the ideal? That perfect world philosophy used to talk about.
It gets reimagined, too. The classic ideal was a refuge, an asylum from life's problems.
Yeah.
A perfect, unchanging, noumenal world you could contemplate.
A place to escape to.
Yeah. But in Dewey's view, where knowledge is active, operative, the ideal realm is no longer something aloof and separate. It becomes that collection of imagined possibilities that stimulates men to new efforts and realizations.
So the ideal isn't a destination. It's inspiration, a blueprint.
Exactly. It's a motivator for action in this world. He used the telegraph example. Distance is a problem.
Right.
The old philosophical response might be to say, distance isn't ultimately real. The operative response, the modern one, is to see communication without physical travel as a possibility, an ideal, and then invent the telegraph to make it real.
Turning an idea into reality through action.
Yes. So philosophy itself must assume a practical nature. It must become operative and experimental. The real world becomes the material of change, and the ideal becomes the intelligently thought out possibilities for improving it.
But this brings us back to that tension, that concern Dewey had.
The big one.
Mm.
Where is the moral progress that corresponds to our economic accomplishments? He saw World War I as a brutal example fought for high, ideal ends, like justice, but using devastatingly realistic means.
Bringing the world well nigh to ruin.
It showed starkly how far apart the real and the ideal had become, how our actions didn't align with our supposed values.
That's a chilling thought.
And Dewey felt reconciling these was crucial. He asked, surely there is no more significant question before the world than this question of the possibility and method of reconciliation of the attitudes of practical science and contemplative aesthetic appreciation.
We need both, the practical and the appreciative.
Absolutely. Without science, we're just victims of nature. But without that appreciation, that sense of value and beauty, mankind might become a race of economic monsters, just focused on efficiency and power.
Finding that balance. Wow. Okay, let's shift to logic. He saw logic differently too, not just as rules for arguments.
Right, not just about formally correct reasoning or finding the inherent thought structures of the universe. For Dewey, logic is both a science and an art.
Science and art. How so?
It's a science because it describes how thinking actually happens effectively. It's an art because it projects methods for making future thinking more successful. It's about improving our thinking process.
And it's based on experience. Empirically founded.
Yes, its principles aren't just pulled out of thin air. Their effectiveness is proven in manifest experience.
Yeah.
He even made the bold claim that mathematics has an empirical status, like metallurgy.
Whoa, math is empirical.
In the sense that it's a product of long historic growth, refined through trials, successes, failures, what works, what doesn't, in solving problems and describing the world.
So the real problem logic should tackle is?
It's the problem of the possibility of the development and employment of intelligent method for deliberately reconstructing experience, especially finding that method where it was most lacking in moral and political affairs.
How do we think effectively about those things?
And he said thinking itself starts with problems, with difficulties, when habit fails, when we have to think our way out.
It's triggered by need.
Exactly. And the first step, facing the facts inquiry, minute and extensive scrutinizing, observation, no intellectual somnambulism, really looking.
But just looking isn't enough.
No, observation is a search for evidence and signs, pointing to something still to come, an idea, a forecast. Like the blacksmith watching the irons color, anticipating when to strike.
Or a doctor observing symptoms to form a diagnosis.
Perfect example. And those ideas, notions, theories, they're hypotheses, tools.
Not final answers.
Not finalities. They're to be accepted as bases of actions which test them. Their values and their consequences, how well they work. By their fruits shall you know them.
And truth is adverbial. That's intriguing.
Yeah, meaning that which guides us truly is true. Truth isn't a static thing you possess. It's a quality of guidance, of effective action and prediction.
And for this process to work, inquiry needs to be open.
Disinterested, he called it, meaning no particular end set up in advance that limits what you look for or what ideas you consider. You have to be emancipated from bias as much as possible. Follow the evidence.
Okay, so how does this apply to morality? He was critical of traditional ethics.
Very. He felt ethical theory was hypnotized by finding some final end or good or some ultimate and supreme law.
The one big answer.
Right, which he saw as a hangover from feudalism and that old bounded ordered cosmos, a relic.
So instead of one final good.
He proposed a plurality of changing, moving, individualized goods and ends. Things are good in context for specific situations. Principles aren't rigid laws, they're intellectual instruments for analyzing individual or unique situations.
Tools again, for figuring out this specific situation.
Exactly, because every moral situation is a unique situation. The focus shifts to intelligence, inquiry, observation, analyzing consequences.
So moral failure isn't just being bad.
Often it's weakness of disposition, some absence of sympathy, some one-sided bias. And virtues aren't fixed states, but active qualities. Wide sympathy, keen sensitiveness, persistence, how you engage with the situation.
And morals are adverbial here too.
Yeah.
You don't achieve justice, you act justly.
You got it. You live healthfully or justly. It's about the quality of the action in the moment. And the only ultimate end, growth.
Growth.
Continuous growth. Education isn't just preparation, it is continuous reconstruction of experience. The goal is getting from the present the degree and kind of growth there is in it, learning and developing through living.
You talk about meliorism too, right? Not optimism or pessimism.
Meliorism, the belief that things can be made better. It spurs intelligence to study the positive means of good and the obstructions, avoiding optimism's complacency and pessimism's despair. It's active hopefulness.
And happiness isn't just arriving somewhere.
No, it's found only in success. But success means succeeding, getting forward, moving in advance. It is an active process, not a passive outcome. Happiness is in the striving, the achieving, the growing.
Even utilitarianism, aiming for the greater good, fell short for him.
Because it's still fixated on a single end. Pleasure-making work and activity just a means not valuable in themselves.
Okay, turning to society. He wasn't keen on abstract theories here either.
No, theories like society exists for the individual, or vice versa, they suffer from the logic of general notions. They talk about the state or the individual as abstractions.
Instead of real people and institutions.
Right, this or that concrete human being, this or that special institution. Abstract talk closes inquiry, he said. It stops us from looking at specifics.
And individuality. It's not something we're just born with.
Not in a social or moral sense. It's something to be wrought out. It requires initiative, inventiveness, and crucially, social changes. Modifying our environment are the only means of the creation of changed personalities. We shape our institutions, and they shape us.
So we should judge institutions by
Their educative effect. What kinds of people do they help create? What types of individuals they foster?
and the state, not the ultimate end.
Nope. The modern state, powerful as it is, should be an instrumentality for promoting and protecting other and more voluntary forms of association. It shouldn't be the supreme goal itself.
Like a conductor.
That was his analogy. Its job is to foster and coordinate the activities of voluntary groupings, not dominate them.
Which implies pluralism. Lots of different groups.
Absolutely. He saw the growth of all sorts of voluntary groups, political parties, unions, scientific societies, even transnational interests like mathematicians or churches collaborating. Theory needs to reflect this pluralism.
Organization is just a tool, too.
Organization is never an end in itself. Society is the process of associating, sharing experiences, ideas, values. Organization should facilitate that process, not become rigid and block it.
Which leads to freedom and democracy. For Dewey, freedom is
Freedom is growth, ready change when modification is required. It's the release of capacity, allowing potential to flourish. And democracy. It means human nature is developed only when its elements take part in directing things which are common.
participation is key to development.
Exactly. It's not just a political system, it's a way of life that fosters growth.
So bringing it all together, Dewey's big vision. Science has opened up these amazing possibilities.
Yeah, conceptions of possibility, progress, free movement, and infinitely diversified opportunity.
But the challenge is making those ideas real for us. Getting past the old fixed ways of thinking.
That's the core challenge. These new ideas have to displace from imagination the heritage of the immutable. When we stop seeing the liberation of capacity as a threat to order, then art, poetry, religion can really flourish.
In harmony with science and everyday life.
Right. In harmony with men's unquestioned scientific beliefs and their ordinary day-by-day social activities. It's not about going back. It's about fostering the vital sources of a religion and art that are yet to be, creating something new and integrated.
Wow. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Building on that idea of the real and ideal. If knowledge truly is power, and that power lies in our ability to transform things, not just watch them, how might you start applying this active operative view of intelligence to the challenges, the moral and social issues in your own life?
How can you move beyond those fixed notions, maybe embrace the messiness, the constant evolution, and tap into that hopeful process of genuine growth Dewey was talking about?
Something to definitely mull over.